Looking at the wedding photograph for the 100th time, Sarah felt her blood run cold. There she was, clear as day, standing behind the bride and groom, with that same gentle smile she remembered so well. But that was impossible. Her great-grandmother had been dead for 5 years when this photo was taken. The funeral in 1910 had been devastating for the entire family. Yet here she was, captured forever in sepia tones at her nephew's wedding in 1915. The photograph had been stored in a dusty attic for over a century. Sarah discovered it while cleaning out her grandfather's estate, nestled between old letters and faded documents. At first glance, it seemed like any other family wedding photo from the early 1900s. The bride wore an elaborate dress with intricate lacework. The groom stood proudly in his formal suit, and various family members gathered around them in their finest attire. But as Sarah examined the image more closely, her heart began to race. Behind the happy couple, partially obscured by shadows, but unmistakably present, stood a woman she recognized from other family photographs. The same delicate features, the same kind eyes, the same way of holding her hands clasped in front of her. It was undoubtedly her great-grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep on a cold February morning in 1910. Sarah immediately called her cousin David, who lived across the country and shared her passion for family genealogy. When she described what she had found, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. David was a skeptical man by nature, a retired engineer who believed in facts and evidence. But even he couldn't explain away what Sarah was describing. The wedding had taken place on June 15, 1915. Sarah had the marriage certificate to prove it, along with newspaper clippings announcing the union between Thomas Whitmore Jr. and Elizabeth Hamilton. Margaret Whitmore's death certificate clearly stated she had died on February 8, 1910. At the age of 67, the funeral had been well attended, with dozens of family members and friends gathering to pay their respects. Her burial at Greenwood Cemetery was documented in the church records. Yet there she was in the photograph, looking exactly as she had in life, wearing what appeared to be the same dark dress she had been buried in. The image was sharp and clear, not the result of double exposure or photographic trickery common in that era. Sarah had shown the photograph to several experts in antique photography, and they all confirmed that it appeared to be genuine and unmanipulated. The discovery sent Sarah on a deep dive into her family's history, uncovering stories and secrets that had been buried for generations. She learned that Margaret had been deeply concerned about her nephew Thomas Jr.'s choice of bride. Family letters revealed that Margaret had serious reservations about Elizabeth Hamilton, believing her to be more interested in the family's money than in Thomas himself. In one particularly revealing letter, dated just weeks before Margaret's death, she wrote to her sister, "I fear young Thomas is making a terrible mistake with that Hamilton girl. If only I could be there to guide him, to help him see what I see. She will bring nothing but heartache to our family." Margaret had planned to have a serious conversation with her nephew about his engagement, but death had claimed her before she could intervene. The wedding went ahead as planned in 1915. Despite the ongoing tensions of World War I, family members traveled from across the region to attend the ceremony at St. Mary's Cathedral. The photographer, Harold Brennan, was a well-respected professional who had been documenting important family events for wealthy clients for over 2 decades. His reputation was built on producing clear, professional images without the ghostly double exposures that plagued many amateur photographers of the era. But Margaret's concerns about Elizabeth proved prophetic. The marriage was troubled from the start. Elizabeth was indeed primarily interested in the Whitmore family wealth, and within 2 years of the wedding, she had convinced Thomas to make several questionable financial investments that nearly bankrupted the family. The couple's relationship deteriorated rapidly, marked by bitter arguments and long periods of separation. In 1918, Elizabeth abruptly left Thomas, taking with her a significant portion of the family's remaining assets. She moved to California and was never seen or heard from again. Thomas was left emotionally and financially devastated, and he never fully recovered from the betrayal. He died alone in 1925, at the relatively young age of 35, officially from pneumonia, though family members whispered that he had simply lost the will to live. The wedding photograph remained in the family's possession, passed down through generations, but rarely discussed. Most family members who saw it over the years noticed something odd about it, but couldn't quite put their finger on what was wrong. Some mentioned feeling uneasy when they looked at it, as if they were being watched. Others reported strange dreams after handling the photograph, dreams in which Margaret appeared to them with urgent warnings about family members who were making poor decisions. Sarah's research revealed that this wasn't the only mysterious appearance Margaret had made after her death. Church records from 1912 mentioned a woman matching Margaret's description, appearing at the funeral of her brother-in-law, standing at the back of the church during the service, before mysteriously vanishing. Several witnesses reported seeing her, but when they went to speak with her after the ceremony, she was nowhere to be found. In 1920, Margaret's own daughter claimed to have seen her mother in the family's old house, standing at the window of what had been Margaret's bedroom. The daughter, Emma, reported that her mother appeared to be trying to communicate something important, gesturing toward a loose floorboard where family documents were hidden. When Emma investigated, she found a will that Margaret had hidden before her death, leaving specific instructions for the care of various family members and warning against certain business associates who could not be trusted. The phenomenon wasn't limited to family sightings. The caretaker at Greenwood Cemetery reported multiple instances of visitors claiming to have seen an elderly woman in a dark dress standing near Margaret's grave, especially during times when family members were facing difficult decisions. The woman would appear to be praying or mourning, but when approached, she would simply fade away like morning mist. Experts in paranormal photography who examined Sarah's wedding photograph were divided in their opinions. Some insisted it was an elaborate hoax, possibly created using early photographic manipulation techniques. Others argued that the image showed signs of genuine supernatural activity, pointing to the way light seemed to bend around Margaret's figure and the subtle differences in photographic grain that suggested she existed on a different plane from the other wedding guests. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, a respected researcher in paranormal phenomena at Columbia University, spent months analyzing the photograph using advanced digital enhancement techniques. Her findings were remarkable. The figure of Margaret appeared to exist in the same physical space as the other wedding guests, casting appropriate shadows and interacting with light in realistic ways. However, spectral analysis revealed that her image had a slightly different luminosity signature, as if she were illuminated by a light source that wasn't visible to the naked eye. Perhaps most intriguingly, Dr. Hawthorne discovered that Margaret's image became clearer and more detailed when viewed under certain lighting conditions, almost as if she were deliberately making herself more visible at specific moments. This suggested an intelligence behind the appearance, a conscious effort to be seen and remembered rather than a simple photographic anomaly. The wedding photograph also revealed other mysteries when subjected to modern analysis. Digital enhancement showed that several other figures in the background appeared to have unusual properties. A man standing near the church entrance seemed to lack the same photographic depth as other guests, and his clothing appeared to be from an earlier era than the 1915 wedding. Research into church records revealed that a man matching his description had died in the church during a fire in 1897, and his spirit was said to still wander the building. Even more disturbing was the discovery of what appeared to be additional figures that were nearly invisible to the naked eye, but became apparent under digital enhancement. These shadowy forms seemed to be watching the wedding proceedings with intense interest, as if the ceremony had drawn the attention of multiple spirits from different time periods. The Whitmore family's history was filled with tragedy and premature deaths, which may have contributed to the high level of spiritual activity surrounding their important events. Thomas Whitmore Sr., Margaret's husband, had died in a factory accident in 1905. Their eldest son had been killed in a hunting accident in 1908. Margaret's own death in 1910 was sudden and unexpected. Despite her apparent good health, the pattern of loss continued through the generations, with family members often dying young or under mysterious circumstances. Sarah's investigation revealed that the family had a history of psychic sensitivity. Margaret's sister had been known as something of a fortune teller in their small town, offering readings to neighbors and accurately predicting several local events. Margaret herself had kept detailed journals describing prophetic dreams and premonitions, many of which had proven accurate. She had predicted the death of a local politician months before it occurred and had warned family members about a bank failure that saved them from significant financial loss. This psychic heritage seemed to have been passed down through the family line. Sarah discovered that she had several relatives who reported unusual experiences, dreams that came true, the ability to sense when family members were in trouble, and occasional sightings of deceased relatives during times of crisis. The wedding photograph appeared to be part of a larger pattern of spiritual communication within the Whitmore family. The photograph's discovery in 2025 coincided with another family crisis. Sarah's elderly aunt was facing a difficult decision about whether to sell the family's ancestral property to developers who wanted to build a shopping complex. The land had been in the family for over 150 years and held immense sentimental value. But the financial pressures were mounting. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Margaret's appearance in the photograph was somehow connected to this modern-day dilemma. A reminder of the importance of preserving family legacy and making decisions based on more than just financial considerations. The property in question was the same land where Margaret had lived and died, where generations of Whitmores had been born and raised. Local historians had documented that the area had been significant to Native American tribes long before European settlers arrived, and some believed it held special spiritual energy. The combination of family tragedy, psychic sensitivity, and historically significant land created what paranormal researchers called a perfect storm for supernatural activity. Sarah decided to have the photograph professionally restored and enlarged, hoping to reveal additional details that might provide more clues about Margaret's posthumous appearance. The restoration process yielded surprising results. Not only did Margaret's image become even clearer, but previously invisible text became visible in the background of the photograph. Written in what appeared to be Margaret's handwriting were the words, "Protect the legacy," barely visible on what looked like a piece of paper tucked into the church's bulletin board. This discovery led Sarah to investigate further into Margaret's final days. She uncovered evidence that Margaret had been working on a comprehensive family history project before her death, documenting not just names and dates but also the values and principles that had guided the Whitmore family for generations. Margaret had been particularly concerned about preserving the family's charitable traditions and their commitment to their local community. The wedding photograph seemed to be Margaret's way of continuing her protective role in the family, appearing at a moment when her guidance was desperately needed but tragically unavailable. Her presence in the image served as a warning about Elizabeth's true nature and a reminder of the importance of choosing partners who shared the family's values rather than those who were simply attracted to their wealth. Modern paranormal investigators who studied the case suggested that Margaret's appearance was what they called an intervention manifestation, where a deceased person manages to appear in physical form at a crucial moment to influence events in the living world. These manifestations are extremely rare and require enormous spiritual energy, typically occurring only when the departed person has an overwhelming need to protect or guide their loved ones. The fact that Margaret appeared specifically at Thomas Jr.'s wedding, rather than at any other family gathering, suggested that she had focused all her spiritual energy on this single moment, when she believed her intervention was most critically needed. The clarity and detail of her image in the photograph indicated the tremendous effort she had expended to make her presence known and her message clear. Sarah's research also uncovered evidence that other family members had subconsciously sensed Margaret's presence at the wedding, even if they didn't consciously recognize her in the photograph. Several wedding guests had mentioned in letters and diary entries that they felt watched during the ceremony, and some reported feeling unexpectedly sad or anxious despite the joyful occasion. The bride herself had complained of feeling cold throughout the ceremony, even though it was a warm June day. The photographer, Harold Brennan, had noted in his professional records that the wedding was one of the most challenging assignments of his career. His equipment had malfunctioned several times, and he had experienced unusual difficulties with lighting and shadows throughout the event. He described feeling an unusual presence in the church and mentioned that several of his photographs from that day had shown unexplained anomalies that he had never encountered in his decades of professional work. These contemporary accounts, discovered more than a century later, provided compelling evidence that Margaret's spiritual presence had been strong enough to affect not only the photographic equipment, but also the emotional atmosphere of the entire wedding celebration. The fact that multiple people had sensed something unusual, without being able to identify exactly what it was, suggested that Margaret's manifestation had operated on multiple levels of perception. The wedding photograph also revealed the limitations of early 20th century understanding of supernatural phenomena. While several guests had sensed Margaret's presence, none had the knowledge or vocabulary to interpret what they were experiencing. The photograph remained the only concrete evidence of her appearance, a silent testimony to her love and concern for her family that would not be fully understood for over a century. Sarah's discovery of the photograph prompted other family members to examine their own inherited photographs more carefully. They found several other images that, upon close inspection, showed unusual figures or unexplained shadows. A family reunion photograph from 1925 showed what appeared to be Margaret standing behind a group of children, her hand resting protectively on the shoulder of Thomas Jr., who looked gaunt and ill just months before his death. A Christmas photograph from 1922 showed a figure in the window of the family home that couldn't be accounted for by any living family member present at the gathering. The figure appeared to be watching over the family celebration, with the same gentle expression that Margaret wore in the wedding photograph. These additional sightings suggested that Margaret's protective presence had continued long after the 1915 wedding, manifesting whenever her family faced significant challenges or transitions. The accumulation of evidence painted a picture of a woman whose love for her family had transcended death itself. Margaret's appearances weren't random or meaningless. They occurred at specific moments when her guidance and protection were most needed. The wedding photograph was perhaps the most dramatic example, but it was part of a larger pattern of spiritual intervention that had continued for decades after her physical death. Sarah's investigation also revealed the profound impact that Margaret's warnings, delivered through spiritual manifestations, had on family decisions over the years. Family members who had sensed her presence during difficult times often reported feeling guided toward making choices that, in retrospect, proved to be wise and beneficial. Those who had ignored or dismissed these spiritual promptings often found themselves facing the consequences of poor decisions. The story of the wedding photograph became a powerful reminder of the enduring nature of family love and the importance of honoring the wisdom of previous generations. Margaret's appearance in the 1915 photograph served as a bridge between past and present, connecting modern family members with the values and insights that had sustained the Whitmore family through multiple generations of challenges and changes. As Sarah continued her research, she began to understand that the photograph was more than just a paranormal curiosity. It was a family heirloom of immense emotional and historical significance. It represented the continuity of family bonds across the boundary between life and death, and it carried forward Margaret's message about the importance of making decisions based on love, wisdom, and genuine care for family welfare, rather than material considerations alone. The photograph also served as a stark reminder of the consequences when spiritual warnings are ignored. Thomas Jr.'s tragic fate after marrying Elizabeth Hamilton demonstrated what happened when family members rejected the guidance that Margaret had tried so desperately to provide. His lonely death at age 35 stood as a testament to the accuracy of Margaret's concerns and the tragedy of dismissing spiritual intervention as mere superstition. Modern family members who learned about Margaret's story began to pay closer attention to their own intuitive feelings during important decisions. They reported feeling more connected to their family history and more aware of the responsibility they carried to make choices that honored the sacrifices and wisdom of previous generations. The wedding photograph became a focal point for family discussions about values, priorities, and the importance of choosing life partners who shared the family's commitment to integrity and community service. That the discovery of the photograph also sparked interest among researchers studying the intersection of photography and paranormal phenomena. The image provided one of the clearest examples ever documented of a spiritual manifestation captured on film during the early days of photography. The fact that it had remained undetected for over a century, only to be discovered when modern digital enhancement techniques made Margaret's presence unmistakable, suggested that there might be many other historical photographs containing similar spiritual evidence waiting to be uncovered. Sarah's story attracted attention from paranormal investigators around the world, who saw it as compelling evidence for the survival of consciousness after physical death. The combination of historical documentation, multiple witness accounts, and photographic evidence created what many considered to be one of the most convincing cases of spiritual intervention ever recorded. The wedding photograph ultimately became a symbol of hope for families dealing with loss and grief. Margaret's appearance demonstrated that death does not necessarily end the bonds of love and protection that connect family members. Her image in the photograph served as visual proof that those who have passed on continue to care about the welfare of their loved ones and may find ways to communicate important guidance during crucial moments. For Sarah, the discovery transformed her understanding of her family's history and her own place within the generational chain. She began to see herself not just as an individual making isolated decisions, but as part of a continuous family story in which the wisdom and love of previous generations continued to influence and guide contemporary choices. The photograph connected her to Margaret's protective presence and reminded her of the responsibility she carried to honor her family's legacy while making wise decisions for future generations. The story of Margaret's appearance in the 1915 wedding photograph ultimately transcends the boundaries between the living and the dead, between past and present, between the physical and spiritual worlds. It demonstrates the enduring power of love, the importance of family wisdom, and the mysterious ways in which those who have passed on continue to participate in the lives of those they leave behind. The photograph stands as lasting evidence that death is not the end of family bonds, but rather a transformation of the ways in which those bonds are expressed and experienced across the generations.